We're out at the Hidden Springs Senior Living Home, and with us today is Ron Parsons. And Ron is going to talk to us about his life in the military, his life in careers, and kind of like how we're going to make it, right?
Yeah, I hope you ask questions, and I can answer
Well,
that
we
way.
will. We'll ask you some questions. So
Sure.
let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
When were you born?
October 7th, 1930.
Oh, that's quite a few days ago.
Yeah, so my wife is the same, and she's only 5 days apart from me, and
Right.
we'll be 94 come October.
My mother's 94. She
Oh,
in July.
good for
She'll
her.
be 94. Yeah, yeah. 94 is the new 80, I think. You know?
Oh, I think so too. I never expected to be as coherent. I'm not coherent. I never expected to be this active when I reached the age
Yeah.
that I am. When I was younger, that
Yeah,
is.
when you're younger, you think 94 is so far in the future.
Yes, it is.
I'll never see it. Yeah,
But my mother lived to be 100,
yeah.
and more recently, meaning several years ago, I just was aware of that, and I
Yeah.
thought I might go on and live.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can probably tell my speech has slowed down, and I have to fish for words now, whereas that was not the case a few years back.
Yeah, so we all do that. We all do that. So
Okay.
since you're a veteran, when did you enlist?
I enlisted in October of 1948, which is right after I graduated high school.
Right. So you lived during the war there.
Yes, I was one of the early Marines to be sent to Korea.
Right. That's a cold place.
Yes, it is.
That's what I hear. Everyone says it was cold in Korea. Even today, I have a person that works for me. He was in Korea. He said it was cold.
And the hardest part of the war for me and my contemporaries was a place in the mountains of North Korea.
Yeah.
And it was cold. It was something like 20 degrees below zero at night.
Yeah. So what did you do in the military?
I was trained to be a field radio operator, which means I could take 20 words a minute Morse code
Yeah.
and operate the field radios.
Yeah.
However, they sent me to what is called high-speed radio school, and I advanced my code taking capacity up to about 35 words a minute. You can take it by a typewriter then.
Right,
It's too
yeah.
fast to write.
Yeah.
So it just so happened I got out of high-speed radio school at just about the time the Korean War started. And I knew in advance that I wasn't going to be operating a radio on an important network with my 35 words a minute, because the Marines weren't they were relatively small in those days.
Right.
And I just knew that I was going to be a field radio operator, and that's what it turned out.
Yeah. And carry a rifle.
Yeah, it even went further than that. As a low-speed operator, I was armed with a .45 caliber pistol.
Yeah.
When I got to be a high-speed operator, I was armed with an M2 carbine, and knowing or being almost certain that I'd be carrying heavy radio equipment up mountains, I went to a pawn shop and bought myself a .45 automatic pistol so I could have that rather than try to carry a carbine with a heavier piece of radio equipment.
Yeah.
We had a Jeep, but we almost never used the Jeep.
Well, it'll never go where they want to send you.
Well, that's right. We only worked on hilltops and
Sure.
mountaintops.
Yeah.
The Jeep was just a way to haul our stuff from one place to another.
Yeah. So you were in Korea. What happened after that?
I was discharged. I'm getting ahead of myself here. My last duty post after Korea was at Quantico, Virginia. And I still had a year to go because the Marine Corps had extended the enlistment of the enlisted men by a year at the beginning of the Korean War. I had joined for 3 and I got 4, which I'm not complaining about.
Right.
So that last year, I spent at what's known as schools troops, personnel that do things, carry out duties or situations in the training of officers at Quantico, which is one of the things I did up there at that time.
Yeah.
And I got out a few weeks early, which was about late August of 1952, and became a civilian again.
All right. So what kind of job? When did you get married?
1955 in February.
Okay.
We were engaged a long time. In fact, I met my first wife while I was at Quantico, right after I got to Quantico. A fellow Korean War veteran, who was from Richmond, introduced me to the woman who became my first wife, and we became engaged. But I had gotten into school, and we put off marriage until I was finished with that. And I met her in 1952 and married her in 1955.
That's a nice little engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It worked out. The time didn't seem like that long because
No.
I was busy.
Yeah. It goes fast. So what kind of career did you have?
It's too long and varied to talk about, but I will say this. I started out as a Marine, as an art student, and as a state police trooper thereafter. I ended up as a practicing lawyer, and I left that at age 65,
Yeah.
and my wife and I retired.
Yeah.
But
Well, it sounds like
there were other things I
in the
did.
middle, but it
It's-
got you there to the end. That's a pretty good ending there.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was made not so happy by the fact that the reason I retired at 65 was that my wife, who was just a year behind me, had developed a disease that we knew would kill her within 5 years. So I retired from the law practice, and together we did other things until she died 4 years later.
Right. Right. And then you met this lovely lady you have now.
Known her for ages. My wife and I were friends with her and her first husband way back in the 50s. She married a young man who I was at Quantico with in the Marines. And he's the one who got me a blind date in Richmond with the Richmonder who married me in 1955.
Yeah.
But I was in her first wedding, 1953, as an usher. She was at my first wedding, and where am I going with this? After my wife died, I remember that Miriam was a widow for the second time.
Yeah.
Because we had kept in touch, and by we I mean my wife, me,
Sure.
and her. And I proposed to her, and this was in 1999, and she accepted, surprisingly. And we've been married going on 25 years
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
where I was married to my first wife for 44 years.
Yeah. Right. That's great. I think people do that when they, you look at it, you retired at 65 because you're not going to wait because you've wasted not wasted, you put this time together thinking you're going to retire and be able to have plenty of time to do things.
Yes.
And then a situation comes up and we don't have the time. So I think the advice is what? Don't wait.
Well, I'll put it this way. When my first wife died, I didn't have in mind proposing to Miriam. My first wife and I had become, well, I'll use a fancy term, yachters, boaters,
Right.
when right after she was diagnosed with her illness. And she didn't want to be a long-term patient and just sitting around waiting to die. What we did is bought a 40-foot sailboat, and it was at Tierra Verde, which is between Petersburg, and the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved aboard it, and eventually, for various reasons, we knew that we would be there without going places that are far away, which is what I had intended. And we bought a condominium right across the street. Not bought, leased a condominium, and it was right across the street from the marina where the boat was based. And we had many guests from Virginia come down
Sure.
and spend time with us and go boating out of the Gulf of Mexico
Yeah.
with us. Well, I'm not sure where to go from there. It was a very eventful time.
Yeah.
Eventually, we changed boats because my wife was getting weaker, and she could no longer co-captain a 40-foot yacht.
Right. It's a lot of work.
A sailing yacht, a sloop.
Sure.
So we sold that, and I bought a small motor cruiser, and we spent some time going up and down the Intracoastal Waterway.
Yeah.
And we didn't pull into marinas very often. We slept on the boat and cooked on the boat, except when she had to undergo chemotherapy. I would go into a marina, dock the boat, rent a car, drive her back down to Tampa, Florida,
Right.
for her chemotherapy. And then we would drive back up to wherever we were, where the boat was, and continue our boating.
I hear that the happiest day of a man's life is when he buys his boat, and the second happiest day is when he sells it.
That's about right. Yeah, that's true to some extent. But I had two boats, and this might interest you. When my wife was getting close to the end, I decided to. We were at where were we anyway? Skidaway Island, Georgia, which is just offshore from Savannah, and it's one of the so-called sea islands. You don't have to take a boat to go to Savannah. You can take a bridge over a short water stretch. We lived there, and I decided to ship the boat. This was a small motor cruiser. Decided to ship it back to Florida, or where we were before we started taking trips. And the individual who showed up with a trailer to take that boat, it was a sizable boat, back down to Florida, wrecked on the way down, and the boat was destroyed. So that's how we, quote, got rid of the second boat. Whereas the first boat sold rather quickly.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't owned a boat since. However, this is pertinent to what I'm saying here. I wasn't thinking of proposing to Miriam. What I was thinking of was buying another boat that by myself, could handle, and then just living the life of a boat vagrant of sorts. And well, it didn't work out that way.
Miriam put her foot down. That sounds like
Well,
that to me.
I realized that I didn't want to be alone before too much longer.
Yeah.
And that's why I remembered that Miriam was up in Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
And we had been corresponding, and I mean, my wife was a friend of hers and so forth. So I proposed to her, and she kind of surprised me by accepting.
Yeah. Well, now what am I going to do, right?
Yes, well, it worked out just beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautifully for me.
Well, how did you get the front royal?
Our children, a few of them in Virginia, hers and mine, came to the conclusion that we needed to be in a place like Hidden Springs, whereas we were in a regular non-medical care apartment, and it was a beautiful large apartment in Fredericksburg. We had given up the house, which was 3-story. Well, in the apartment, we were very, very comfortable there, but we decided that, yes, we'll do what the children want us to do, and they wanted to put us here at Hidden Springs. So we came here.
Right.
And our many belongings, which had been in a fairly large apartment, were stored in children's basements and so forth, and I never saw most of them again, and still haven't.
Yeah. So how many children do you have between you?
Well, 5 between us, but it wasn't that easy. My wife and I had 5, and she had 2. My first were daughters, her 2 were daughters. They grew up in a way at the same age, actually, and knew each other. But I also had sons. 1 daughter, 2 daughters are still left. 2 of the sons died. I got too old and I outlived them.
Yeah. That's what they say about your doctor. You outlive your doctor.
Yeah, well, that might be the case.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But it's not that I particularly want to live to 100. I'm learning that becoming old, even though I might not be completely disabled, it's no fun at all. And I just don't think I want to live to be 100 years old like my mother did.
Sure.
Hers lived to be 95.
Yeah.
So the situation, we're here, we're still walking around. This place gives us everything we want. And I don't know how long we'll still exist. She doesn't either.
Yeah.
We're just here.
Take it one day at a time.
Yeah, we don't have any duties here, although she's quite a fine pianist, and she had to give up her Steinway when we moved up here, Steinway piano. But there is a very, very good electronic piano at this place in the dining room. And a few people heard her play, and she's really good. Heard her play and asked her if she would play as often as she wanted to.
Sure.
But it would be nice if she would play for 15 minutes before the evening meal. And that's what she does now.
Now she's got a job, right?
Yeah, and everybody knows Miriam now, and they love to hear her play.
That's great.
I'm just known as Miriam's husband, that's all.
Well, we want to thank you for talking with us, and we want to thank you for your service as a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yes, that's
what
true.
They say that.
That's true, but I've lost touch with just about all of them now, and I've probably outlived most of my contemporaries who were Marines.
Right.
I will say this, at Korea we fought alongside a small unit of British Royal Commandos and Royal Marine Commandos, and I became acquainted with a few of them, and I went to England and got together with several of them, and this was in Oxford, and I had one and his wife visit us in Missouri. But we had that experience after we were all out of the Marines.
Yeah.
And that was fun.
Yeah, that was great. Well, again, thank you so much, Ron. I really appreciate it.
You're
Thank
welcome. Glad to do it. Go ahead.
No.
I wish I were younger and more adept to this sort of thing when younger. I was a lawyer for the last 15 years of my non-retirement.
Right.
And as a lawyer, I had to speak and think, and now I'm gotten to the point, as I think this setup will illustrate where I don't speak all that well
Oh,
anymore.
you did great. You did
And
great.
I forget words, but that's that.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
lucky
okay.
to be in the shape that I'm in.
Yeah, you did great, Ron. Really appreciate it. And
Thank
thanks
you,
again.
sir.
Thank you.